Hi, we got something to talk about this morning. But first, let me welcome you to a Eastern Carolina late spring, early summer day. The turtles are out, the osprey are out. It's just an incredible morning. It's going to get hot later this afternoon. But the issue I want to talk about is about a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. Let's talk. Just finished our morning workout on Saturday mornings. It's at-home workout, so it's a lot less intense than what we do at the gym. But what I wanted to talk about is acetylcholine. We tend to think of, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about Alzheimer's or dementia or some neurological condition. Well, we are, sort of, but and we know that it declines. We know that most of the population is deficient in choline, which obviously is part of acetylcholine. We can't really measure that well acetylcholine, so we kind of guesstimate that those deficient in choline are also deficient in acetylcholine. All right, so what's the big deal? Acetylcholine is the dominant neurotransmitter in the brain, and clearly it is associated with dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's to an extent, but it is also, and this is sort of the real interesting thing, it is also associated with sarcopenia. Or if you're a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old, you don't think in terms of sarcopenia, you think in terms of, my muscles aren't very big. You know, why is it I don't have enough muscles? Well, it's the same thing. It is the dominant neurotransmitter, messenger, if you will, to creating muscle mass. It is the electrical impulse that gets sent from the nerve to the receptor to do a contraction. So the deficiency of choline, and we're going to assume acetylcholine as well, isn't just about dementia. The physical manifestation of dementia at a far earlier age on this level of thinking is about being undermuscled, sarcopenia. So when you start thinking about what's good for my muscles, you then start to realize that you're actually treating your brain. So your muscles and your brain, the acetylcholine is the commonality between both. And most people don't think that way. You have all these neurological supplements and or medications for Alzheimer's and dementia, etc. And they're all, some are very choline relative, but it's all for the head. But if you increase your acetylcholine by, we'll get into the supplementation later up on the labs and so on, if you simply address muscle, you work out. I mean, muscle has to do with working out. Clearly, some activity is required. I prefer HIIT and I prefer HIIT in the off days, but that's a far secondary source. You need to push in the demand. You need to create that demand, but you also need to have, in terms of your diet, choline, in terms of your neurotransmitters, acetylcholine. That is a profound difference. And so here's why I'm saying all that. Here's why I'm cranked up on this. I'm cranked up on this is because I've done a number of videos on choline and how it's helpful for your, deficiency and why you need to have it. It's helpful for all your brain problems. But what I didn't realize, it's equally helpful for sarcopenia. And actually, that's an easier way. See, if you don't have enough choline, your brain, your nerves, they tend to cannibalize themselves for where is the choline? They need this. And actually, it's not just a neurotransmitter. It is the membranes of your red blood cells, of all your cells, of your nerve cells. And so that's why the dominant source in nature that we eat through animal foods primarily is lecithin, which is called phosphatidylcholine. Yeah, lecithin, phosphatidylcholine. That comes in, that gets broken down, and it's from there all these things get put together. But what people in supplement companies don't realize, they go, well, we don't need to do that. That's too ordinary. That's too common. That's silly. Let's give the little piece of choline that is actually used in the brain right before acetylcholine. Isn't that a smarter way of doing it? That's not a smarter way of doing it, because choline serves two purposes. The neurotransmitters, just talked about. The other is your membrane coverage, we'll say, your membrane skin. And that has to do with receiving and sending messages. And that's what's profound. I want to show you what I found. But while we're here on the dock in a brilliantly beautiful Eastern North Carolina morning, I just got to show you that it is just the touch of perfection. The turtle heads are all over the place because the word's getting out. This guy feeds you. And so we now have a collection of 4 or 5 females and 1 overly aggressive male that has to be worked with separately. But it is just amazing. So far this morning we've seen osprey, purple martins looking for a home. Certainly the turtles, they're kind of the given background. It is just splendid. And why do I tie this into the video? Because this moment of appreciating this, being in nature, is helping my acetylcholine. You know, as we get older, we kind of lose the physicality of life. And what I mean by that is we tend to stop doing the things that kept us physically active. Maybe we play tennis and maybe we play golf, and those are better than nothing. But for the most part, this is well documented, there just isn't enough physical activity as we get older. And we tend to think of that as, oh, it's a responsibility, I gotta go do something. No, being physical is for your brain. Absolutely, being physical is for your brain. Putting a demand on muscle mass, wherever that is also putting a demand on your cerebral need for acetylcholine. So by exercising, you're getting your brain. You know, when you see those pictures of Alzheimer's or brains that are far near death or even post-mortem, you'll find that they have actually lost part of their brains. And part of that, and there's explanations about, you know, the tau plaque and the neurofibrillary tangles, push that aside. Let me give you a simple understanding of that. The brain is cannibalizing itself for what it needs. You go, oh, that's interesting. It's truly, that's part of this need. We need acetylcholine. So it takes her from, you know, it has this hierarchy. Certainly the brain is important, but all the things that the cells need, every cell in your body needs choline, acetylcholine, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylinositol. These things are part of the membrane of every cell. That needs to be taken care of. And if you don't have enough, as we've talked about the deficiency, certainly in this country, this is what happens. So bring in the physicality, up your level of choline as a basis, but there's one other thing I'm going to show you for this. Okay, so this is what I got to show you. It was a bit of detective work to figure out, why did I have this experience? And why do I feel that it so specifically affected my choline manufacturing process, endogenous choline manufacturing process, acetylcholine specifically? So I started taking, I've done a number of videos before about different choline supplements and the importance of choline and the sources of choline, and we're going to touch on that tonight as well. But this was a remarkable experience in addition to what I thought I already knew, and so I had to go a little deeper for my own peace of mind and therefore make a video out of it. Okay, so it all started with taking this particular supplement that we're going to explore, but it's going to lead us to different territory, new turf in understanding this. Taking this supplement for choline support. Why did it make me feel stronger in the gym and more focused? And the reason I can say that, it's stronger in the gym, because I hadn't increased my weights for about 1.5 years. I started increasing my weights. In the time that I needed for my HIT to go to failure increased, and I couldn't figure it out. And it dawned on me that it was this particular supplement, and that wasn't what I was thinking about. And then I started thinking, this actually is more profound than I think that they even know it is. And this company doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. So the experience made me review all that I knew to go to a deeper understanding of choline in supporting acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is really important for muscle contraction, and it's the most dominant neurotransmitter in the brain. All right, so what the product said is, in a complex for quick absorption to rebuild every cell in your body, benefiting every key system. Ordinarily, I would have seen this claim as completely over the top. That's like, does everything. And therefore, it would have been disqualified. But it was recommended to me by people that I tend to have some belief that they have some credibility. So it's called BioBody PC contains, PC means phosphatidylcholine, but it goes far beyond phosphatidylcholine. You know, when I try to remember, when I would tell people about this, I go, oh, it's a phosphatidylcholine thing. So I had to go back and look more deeply. The trick is here, it is lipophilic. What does lipophilic mean? Lipophilic means it goes directly into your bloodstream. It does not get digested. So lipophilic is popular with a number of supplements. So for instance, we have lipophilic glutathione for emergencies. We have lipophilic lipophilic vitamin C is very popular. It's been out for 4 or 5 years. So this whole lipophilicization of key nutrients has made a huge difference. Okay, so this is not only phosphatidylcholine, otherwise known as lecithin, and lecithin ensures cell membrane integrity and function. Okay, phosphatidylcholine, we are going to find out more about that specifically, and genes that regulate that, vital to mitochondria. And that would have a lot to do with not only muscle contraction, but brain. Phosphatidylinositol goes along with that. It's brain and neurotransmitters. And phosphatidylserine, essential for memory. I summarize all of this by saying this is part of the skin, the membrane, of every cell in your body. Every cell in your body. So this is not so much the neurotransmitter choline goes to make acetylcholine. It's about it goes to help cover. And so when you take in, ideally you're actually having choline in your diet, there is a fork in the road. Is it going to go off to make acetylcholine, or is it eventually going to be made into the neurotransmitter? Will it go to the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, or will it go to making any one of these membrane fats? Phosphatidylcholine, they're surfactants, so they do all these different things. It's hard to put them in just one category. Okay, so the body bio-PC contains concentrated lipophilic levels of these 4 things. So PCPE, PI, so they're all phosphatidyl. So these are called essential phospholipids, okay? Lipids simply being fat. Why is this important, and what do these ingredients do for us? Phosphatidylcholine ensures membrane integrity and function, and so, well, collectively, phosphatidylcholine is one of the dominant essential phospholipids on all cell membranes, widely used as a treatment option for fatty liver disease. We're going to learn a lot about that today. And there is a lot of clinical research for the regression of, fancy word, of fatty liver, steatosis, fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So just using phosphatidylcholine for something like fatty liver, and fatty liver, if you punch that into Google or anything else, you can realize now over 1/4 of the world's population has fatty liver, and the rates have just zoomed. They're going up even faster than dementia and Alzheimer's, but they're almost in lockstep. And you go, I wonder if they're related. I wonder if they're related. After treatment with these essential phospholipids. Phospholipids are called essential since they constitute structural and functional components of all cell membranes. So what this product did was make it so your digestive system isn't going to break it down, and it's going to be immediately usable by the body. Okay, all right, let's see. And by the way, this came from studies, not from the product. Regression of fatty liver following phosphatidylcholine, and that's in 2022. That's this year, just a couple months ago. That's how new this is. Okay, so what is NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? It is acquired metabolic stress-induced liver disease. Doesn't tell you much, does it? Fancy words. Caused by multifactorial pathogenic mechanisms, and we are going to explore some of that a little bit, not too deep. Insulin resistance is a leading factor causing accumulation of fatty acid in the liver. Genetic susceptibility, SNPs, single nuclear polymorphisms, absolutely has to do with that. We'll talk about that too. Coupled with choline deficiency also play a role in the pathogenesis of NASH. This is another one, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is just another name for the same thing without cirrhosis. So liver problems. Summary of the association between SNPs and the odds of developing choline deficiency, associated organ dysfunction, meaning liver. So the odds of you having a mutation, and we're going to get into the mutations, and having a liver problem are pretty high on these particular SNPs. So I reduced this down from a long list. And these are, if you have this particular mutation, and you're going to find out about it, that this increases your organ dysfunction. If you have choline deficiency, if you have PEMT, this, I'm not going to read every line, but I can say this also increases your odds of having liver dysfunction. And this one down here. So there are mutations out there that directly affect your ability to generate your own choline. And consequently, that's a problem. If you can't do that yourself a little bit, you are really up a creek. So there is consistent and strong associated evidence demonstrating that common genetic variants throughout choline and folate metabolism impact the metabolic handling of choline and the risk of nutrient inadequacy across a variety of dietary context. I know it says what? It says it's important and it affects a lot of things. How's that? And that was from, where's the year? 2017. It came from common genetic variants, alter metabolism, and influence dietary choline requirements. That means that certain people who have certain mutations, some of which I just listed, have a greater need for choline, and having whole food sources of choline, if they don't get it, they have a problem. So now we're starting to circulate a specific population. Problematic SNPs for choline synthesis. I know this is blinding. I'm just putting it in a diagram so you'll at least see it. Here is one of those SNPs, one of those mutations that was just mentioned. Here's another one of those mutations, and here's another one. So remember PEMT, there's SAM, S-medenyl-methionine, just to give you a little orientation. There's MTHFD1, here's MTHFDR, which we'll get into that in a second, but just know they do affect you. So in the bigger picture of methylation, let's put in, here's where choline comes in. Here's the first, this is an enzyme, phosphatidylethanolamine methyltransferase. Uh-oh, got a problem. And we're looking at me, by the way, so I'm pretty candid with sharing this with you. This says it's going to be very slow. What other genes were mentioned? Well, there's the FTHFR. This is the big picture, remember, and we'll break it down into smaller ones. There's a problem there. Where else? We're just going to leave it at that. But this affects things like glutathione, affects things like turning neurotransmitters on and off, that's COMT. So yet another mutation I have that is involved with choline changing to acetylcholine production, which is the MTHFD1 and MTHFR. So right here, this is from a panel I've done from Strategene. So if anybody who's worked with me, obviously you'll recognize these. I've done this for you. And what you'll see is, let's start with here. I'm homozygous for this particular gene, and this tells me it's very slow. This is actually the worst gene you can have for MTHFR, that's methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. Who cares? But it means it's very difficult for me to eat folate, folic acid if you will, in my diet, and convert it, get it methylated with B12 to then go on to help reduce my homocysteine. So I have a propensity for elevated, chronically high homocysteine, and that's not a good thing. Homocysteine is a toxin. It's a neurotoxin. So most people, well, this is back, 15, 20 years ago when I first started testing for this, my strongest association was for autism. This is my people who came in to see me, and I would have to write on the script, let's go check this gene out. Right now you can get whole panels, right, of related panels. So that's how important this was. We could test it individually that long ago. And these are the other ones I've just told you about. I'm heterozygous on those. You go boom, boom. This is getting embarrassing, huh? This is now another person's panel of what we call this a SAM panel on Strategene. It's what they call it. They put related mutations together, which is helpful. And so this person is homozygous for one of these mutations, these SNPs, right? Here we go. Plus plus means homozygous. There's the PEMT, right? We saw that in a couple diagrams. And here's me. I decided to check me. I am homozygous in that. Not only that, I told you about those other two genes, and I'm homozygous for these genes too, that I'm not going to go into great detail because we'd be spending a lot of time here. But let me just show you that the PEMT, right here, homozygous, this is a variant. This slows things down so much, right? That's what the little clock sign is. Slows things down so much that by 30% slower, it's 30% more difficult just based on this particular variant for me to make my own choline. So I'm really dependent on my food sources. So it's got to be whole food sources of egg yolk and liver. So therefore, this is a problem for me. So the PEMT, what does that do? We're going to go a little deeper just into one. We're not doing this for all of them, but to give you an example. So the PEMT, phosphatidylethylamine methyltransferase gene, expresses an enzyme that generates phosphatidylcholine, right? Lecithin from PE, phosphatidyllethylamine. If you can't do this, you can't get to acetylcholine. So PC, phosphatidylcholine, is crucial for maintaining healthy cell membrane permeability, as well as bile flow. This is interesting. And liver health, muscle health, and brain health. Muscle health and brain health. Did you hear that? What has to do with muscle health and brain health? It's acetylcholine. All right, so PEMT is stimulated by estradiol. So men, as well as women with low estradiol, may have lower phosphatidylcholine synthesis. Bile should consist of 10 parts phosphatidylcholine and 1 part cholesterol. So bile is mostly lecithin and a little bit of cholesterol. If this ratio is off, gallstones occur. Phosphatidylcholine is high in breast milk. If low, it leads to mastitis. PEMT needs a lot of SAM, I pointed that out, S-medenylmethionine, to function. Thus, PEMT may be greatly impacted by other genes that require SAM, right? It's saying it needs a lot of SAM. If other cells need SAM, it's even further impaired. Also, other cells that generate SAM. So MTHFR, which I showed you, helps to generate SAM. So making SAM and needing it at the same time puts you in a more dire situation. Okay, so lifestyle. Pregnancy and breastfeeding utilizes large amounts of phosphatidylcholine. Type 1 diabetes tends to depress phosphatidylcholine production, so they are predisposed to gallstones. Estrogen promotes the expression of this gene, and that's really interesting. It says women, we'll look at this in a second, that women, premenopausal women, they're still cycling. So really from menarche to menopause, roughly 40 years, they have higher estrogen. The estrogen pushes this function to produce more choline. If that gene doesn't work, they are choline deficient. So anyway, estrogen promotes the expression of this gene. Therefore, post-menopausal women who are now making less estrogen, are at higher risks due to potentially lower estrogen levels. They can't push it. They can't generate, it can't stimulate that gene to make more choline. Foods high in fats or ketogenic diets utilize significant amounts of bile. Bile flow requires 10 parts phosphatidylcholine, 1 part cholesterol. Gallstones form if this ratio is imbalanced. Supplements and medication, watch out for symptoms of depression from phosphatidylcholine supplementation, which may result from an imbalanced ratio of acetylcholine to serotonin because of that. Choose a non-GMO soy or sunflower-derived phosphatidylcholine. Some medications interact with this enzyme, and consult your healthcare provider. There's a lot. We're not going to go there tonight. That's a whole separate topic. So phosphatidylserine, another part of that formula, is essential for memory. What does it do? Phosphatidylserine is a fatty acid, it's a fatty substance, fatty acid, essential phospholipid, and it covers and protects cells in your brain and carries messages between them. It sensitizes them so the neurotransmitter can go back and forth more readily. Phosphatidylserine plays an important role in keeping your mind and memory sharp. Animal studies suggest that the level of this substance in the brain decreases with age. So you need more with age. You need more things that make that with age. All right, bigger picture. The story of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, fatty liver, however you want to call it. Basically, healthy liver becomes disease and it starts dying. So what you get, it gets fibrosed. So healthy liver to fibrotic liver. It gets into cirrhosis if it goes that far, even farther. So in short, your liver is dying and it doesn't have to be that way. So this is something that is partially self-imposed by not eating real foods that are high in choline. Seriously. But let's pretend we are all exactly the same genetically. Let's get rid of all that stuff. What's going to happen? All right, 70% of your required choline comes from your diet. For all of us, 70%. Choline pathway, you eat choline, diet comes down, choline comes in, you make phosphatidylcholine, it gets changed off to choline gets pulled out. It actually makes phosphatidylcholine again, and then it goes on from there to make acetylcholine. So 70% comes from diet. Here's the PEMT pathway. You've seen that now. This is responsible for making 30% of your choline. So if you have a non-functioning or very poor functioning PEM, phosphatidylmethylamine methyltransferase enzyme, the pathway is plugged up and you're not going to get any of this. You're not going to get your backup. So why do you need to make 30% of choline? It makes you so you have mobility. You don't have to be eating all the time, right? You have a backup battery. It's like we have a Prius, if you didn't guess. You have a Prius, there's a backup battery. Then so if that wasn't working, we would be entirely dependent on gasoline for the car to run. And that would be like entirely dependent on the diet. But having a backup battery, which when you're idling in traffic, we're not burning anything, that's our battery. It allows you to be mobile. Who needs it most? Those with the problematic SNPs. What happens when they become deficient in choline, given their lab SNPs and genomic mutations? When deprived of dietary choline, that's 70%, right? So deprived of that 70% of dietary choline, 77%, call it 80%, of men and 80% of postmenopausal women, right? Low estrogen, postmenopausal women developed fatty liver and muscle damage. So that's 80% of men, like we're saying, 80% of women, postmenopausal women, develop fatty liver. Now, if they had a diet that was rich in choline, egg yolks, and liver, they wouldn't have fatty liver. So this is how popular and dangerous this is. Fatty liver and muscle. liver and muscle damage. And before we showed muscle and brain damage, meaning that this population is entirely dependent on their ability to make choline. If they're not eating it, they better make it. If they can't make it because they have those impaired mutations, they are going to get a fatty liver, and they're going to get an impaired brain, and they're going to have impaired muscle, which is also called sarcopenia. Their ability to make at least 30% of their choline is impaired endogenously for themselves because they have the problematic SNPs, the mutations, that limit them from doing that. So they are totally dependent on their dietary sources of natural choline. Only 44% of pre-menopausal women, 44% of women in that phase from menarche to menopause that have higher estrogen develop fatty liver. Why is that? Because the estrogen, for those who have functioning genes, right? Remember, they have the functioning genes. They have higher estrogen, and that's forcing that gene to make more choline. They can make more choline, so they can make far more than their 30%. But if that's not working for 44% of the women, it doesn't matter how much estrogen they have, they're still going to have a fatty liver if they are not having it dietarily. So 44% of premenopausal women develop fatty liver and non-alcoholic fatty liver or muscle damage associated with choline deficiency. Here we go. Changes in the female hormones levels. Peak production, roughly around year, really from 20 to 40. Here's another way of looking at it. Peak choline synthesis here and here. So here's what's interesting. Women in estrogen, women with no genetic concerns, no SNPs, don't get gallstones. Gallstones typically form between ages 20 and 40 years. Why is that? Between ages and 20 and 40 years. It's because women have the estrogen, they crank that mutation to make more choline. They can compensate for it. But postmenopausal, after 50, average age of menopause is 49 and a half. After 49 and a half, 50, they don't have the estrogen, and if they're not eating it, they are going to suffer consequences. Estrogen and gallstones. So the same question becomes, is it really about estrogen, or is it really about choline deficiency? Or about not being able to produce any choline due to having key genomic mutations. Risk factors for getting gallstones include gender, 6% men, 9% women, estrogen. Women are twice as likely as men to develop gallstones. Men versus women, the power of estrogen. Excess estrogen from pregnancy, hormone replacement therapy, and birth control pills appears to increase cholesterol levels in the bile and decrease gallbladder movement. How's that? That's excess estrogen. These people are the canary in the coal mines. So they are, and here's how it used to be. It used to be considered 40 female, fat, and fair, as in blonde, were the highest likely. So age 40 or older, genomic predisposition, Native American, Hispanic, Mexican origin, overweight or obese, sedentary, pregnant, high-fat diet, having diabetes, losing weight very quickly, taking medications that contain estrogen. So the reason about losing weight very quickly, because your fat cells actually end up being, without going into a lot of detail here, kind of a reserve for estrogen. That's why heavy women tend not to go through a terrible menopause. They don't have the hot flash and so on and so forth because they have this reserve ability to produce estrogen from their fat cells. So when they lose a lot of that capacity, they lose the estrogen, and consequently they're back to a choline, acetylcholine, phosphatidylcholine deprived life. But that 30% depends on your genes, gender, and age. Compared with men and postmenopausal women, younger women are almost 2 times likely to develop fatty liver and muscle damage due to choline deficiency. Estrogen boosts the PEMT activity in the liver. But if the person has a defective PEMT, a SNP, they won't be able to make any choline, so it doesn't help them. High levels of estrogen during pregnancy and breastfeeding ensure proper choline supply for a growing baby. So it's a self-fulfilling. That's another reason that mechanism's there. We got to make it. If some reason this pregnant woman who's growing this fetus, we have to make sure she has her choline to develop the brain for the child and the neural, all these things, right? So how do we do that? Well, we made a temporary, while they have high estrogen, this ability for them to create choline if they don't have the mutation. So this won't be true for women with the PEMT mutations. Okay, continuous dynamic balance between choline, folate, and B12. Choline and folate and B12 all around methylation. Methylation is turning genes on and off, and you can bet the methylation is really active during pregnancy. For all of us, though, it's how do we keep the genes that are supposed to be off, Here's another picture of looking at this. We're not going to go too deep, but these are folate, B12, choline. Folate. What is folate involved with? Here you go, MTHFR, folate, you're eating folate, comes into the diet. Here's MTRR, there's choline, do we have PEM? This is just another diagram. Choline is very important. I could have written in PEMT there. So secondary supplements, nutrients that are required are B6, B2, B3, and zinc. I could go through all of this. Glutathiones down this way. So this is all called methylation down here. It's where glutathione's made, otherwise known as transsulfuration. Fourth, what are the best food sources and supplements? Okay, what about choline and B12? What are the best food supplements for them? All right, so this is from Chronometer, cut out and pasted here. Comparison of choline recommended foods. The highest in choline is egg yolk. The highest in B12 is veal liver. The highest in folate is turkey liver. So if you really want to look at the things that are the highest, those are the three highest. But generally, it's egg yolk. So does that mean, is it duck? Is it goose? Is it quail? You go with what you got, right? Most of us have chicken eggs, and they're not perfect, but if you can get them free-range pastured, obviously that's a lot better. But goose eggs and so on are fine. So what do we got here? This is now for a choline, B12, folate. So if your food really is your medicine, then on a per weight basis, egg yolks are nearly twice the amount of choline than pork liver, right? There you go. Holy smokes, holy smokes. Egg yolks are your medicine for life. I truly believe that. Have 5 a day. So am I telling you to throw away the egg protein? No, I'm not. Have 5 eggs a day. But it's the egg yolks that's most important. All right, know your egg colors. Caged rays is, what are we going to call that? Yellowish versus oranges, free-range pastured. Clearly there's a difference, it depends. And by the way, it's not only that they run around, they eat bugs and everything else, there's a feed. Now that we've moved to Eastern Carolina and there's enough agriculture here, I get to see the feed. There's a bug feed that you bring in and you feed your chickens. So you can feed chickens bugs and a few seeds and so on and grass, kind of what they would be having, but you can give it to them as a feed. So you don't have to give them the soy and the corn. Okay, time for a little history of what we know about choline. Okay, choline, the mother of all substances, 1850, lecithin was identified, 1850. And leth comes from Greek, meaning for egg yolk. So the Greek word for egg yolk is basically lecithin. 1862, lecithin from bile was heated and generated. So now there's lecithin in bile. Now you already know that, right? Choline discovered abundant in brain from autopsies. Lecithin was identified as phosphatidylcholine. So at the time of the Civil War in this country, phosphatidylcholine was just being identified. Surprise realization was that choline was both in the liver and in the brain. What else is both in the liver and the brain? Probably a lot of things. 1954, so almost 100 years, 90 years later, discovered how choline was made into phosphatidylcholine in humans. A second pathway, PEMT, for choline into phosphatidylcholine was identified. Choline identified as part of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So that was 1960. 1930 showed choline prevented fatty liver in dogs. That was University of Toronto by the same person who isolated insulin. 1998, choline determined essential nutrients in human. 1998, then. It's barely 20 plus years ago. 2005 to 22, personal genomic variations used to determine one's choline requirement has become a health focus. And this is a brief history of choline in 2012, and I added to that. Let me bring home for you. Chronic long-term choline deficiency undoubtedly leads to muscle problems, sarcopenia, liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver, cirrhosis, metabolic, insulin resistance problems, and all the consequences of that, like cardio and cerebrovascular disease, etc., etc. Neurological problems, dementia, Alzheimer's, neurological degeneration. Those with genetic, aka SNPs, that make them more vulnerable to choline deficiency will manifest these conditions faster, earlier, more acutely than those who do not. You must know your best food sources for choline, egg yolks, and liver. You must know your specific predisposition to requiring more choline than most people, which is in your SNPs. You can find that out. That's not over your head anymore. This is now showing currently, 2021, 2022, 2021, just 3 studies, the idea of associating choline deficiency with acetylcholine deficiency with Alzheimer's and dementia is now just starting to take place. Now, the reason this seems like an obvious connection, it's hard to measure choline in the blood. There is no actual test that you go to your doctor and say, give me choline. That is an intercellular test that I do. I didn't get into labs in this particular presentation. It's way too long, but that's where I go for that. It's not I don't depend on it 100%. In fact, the federal government gave University of North Carolina, was it a $40 million grant to come up with a usable test that doctors can use to come up with choline, to test for one's choline levels. And also the test for choline, acetylcholine, is very expensive. It's nothing a doctor uses, it's more scientific labs. But these are recent. This is the connection that's happening right now, this year, last year. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has emerged as the liver component of metabolic syndrome. It now affects 1/4 of the world's population. Features associated with fatty liver have frequently been linked to cognitive dysfunction, now you know why, and systemic inflammation, vascular dysfunction, and sleep apnea. Pretty much the same, but just symptoms thereof. Emerging evidence suggests that fatty liver may be the cause of cognitive dysfunction independent of these particular factors, meaning it directly. And so I would put in parenthetically, though it's not mapped out there beyond all doubt, is it's choline deficiency. It's choline deficiency, you can't make acetylcholine, that's a direct connection. So this disruption in the gut-liver-brain axis, meaning choline deficiency disturbs your gut or makes it for an odd gut to the liver-brain axis, is the cause of liver encephalopathy. Liver encephalopathy is your liver dying to the point that it can't get rid of all the toxins, ammonia in particular, and it starts flooding the brain, and you start getting psychiatric disorders, and then eventually you die. So the neuropsychiatric syndrome is the name of hepatic encephalopathy. It's associated with progressive liver disease. It's considering the growing burden of fatty liver. The morbidity from cognitive impairment is expected to have huge societal and economic impact. This is right now, this year, last year. Okay, facts about choline deficiency. 90% of the US population is not consuming enough choline. This is from NIH. Reports from 2007 to 2008, NHANES, which is NIH, only 10% or fewer have usual intakes at or above adequate intake, AIs, adequate intake. Choline intake also decreases with age. Adults over 71 years of age consume, on average, half of what they need. The government nutritional guideline response, I put this together. Go back, we fucked up. We need our choline fast. Decreasing rates in Alzheimer's, sarcopenia rates depends on it. You bet it does. Okay, your choices are: wait for more studies to show the connection between liver dysfunction, choline deficiency, and metabolic syndrome from chronically high consumption of fructose, glucose, and processed foods, or take action now on what we believe to be true given what we know today. The answer is dietary changes, the highest sources of choline, egg yolks and liver, or choline supportive supplementation. So now I have a clue about how this affects me, perhaps more than it will affect you, but I thought I'd share. Till next time. You know, being curious and just appreciating the things that are put in front of you, like all these turtles, for instance, is helping yourself to help your brain. That doesn't have anything to do with working out or physicality, but it's a sign. Keep yourself curious. That's a demand. That's a neurotransmitter demand. Keep yourself curious, asking questions. I find that it's not often you get to be the heart of certain conditions that come together and said, you know, it is primarily about this one thing. In dementia, Alzheimer's, various neurological conditions are about cell membranes, even more than they are about a neurotransmitter. But when you put them together and say, hey, they have the same source, that's what makes it pretty satisfying, because it's easy to improve and you're at the food level of improvement, keeping it basic. Stay curious. So if this is something that you're interested in, that is a topic that I obviously go deeper in terms of labs, in terms of how to do it, in terms of why you would want to do it, various topics, as you've seen that I've done in the past, then please let me know below in a comment. Till then.